Well, hello, good morning and welcome to you. Hope this finds you well. Welcome to our latest Bath Life Business Surgery. This time it's our third in our exploration series with the University of Bath School of Management. My name is Craig Ingham from Bath Life's publisher Media Clash, and thank you for joining today, or indeed for watching on YouTube subsequently, whenever that is. Today we have an important and stimulating session focused on retail. We'll be speaking with Jens Nordfalt, Professor from the School of Management at the University of Bath. It's set to give much needed inspiration and maybe some prompts to action. There'll be some really interesting observations, research pieces and so on, which I think will be directly relevant to almost any retailer. We'll be highlighting some remarkable paradoxes, oddities and unexpected value-adding insights during the discussion. Please do send your questions and thoughts using the Q&A button below. Do add your company name if you'd like, but be anonymous if you prefer. And I think we've had a couple of questions already, which is rather good. Note that today's business surgery, as ever, is being recorded. It'll be on our Bath Life YouTube channel this afternoon. First, some news from us, from Bath Life, before we get going, the ends. Our next Bath Life business surgery is on Monday, 1st November at 11 AM. Again, it's with the University of Bath School of Management. The Sustainability Special. It's another in our exploration series with the university. I think it's really interesting that the university is providing deep dive academic insights, but grounding them in areas which actually matter to the businesses and people within Bath. Great to see that deep connection with the city. These surgeries are bespoke deep dive sessions showcasing companies or organizations' expertise through discussion. Please do talk to us about how you might be involved. They're covered editorial in Bath Life, and then they have this enduring value via our Bath Life YouTube channel subsequently. The business surgeries, by the way, will continue as virtual in the future. There's a real repository of insights, really interesting pieces building up on that YouTube channel. The Bath Life business clubs will be returning in real life from early in the new year. Business starts with a conversation, so let's talk. Talking of conversations, we've got a number coming up on just this Friday, which is the Bath Property Awards Day, Friday lunchtime, at Apex City of Bath Hotel, just a huge gathering of property and pro services companies. It'll be great to hear that hubbub, that susurration of business happening, some of those convivial business meetings subsequently as well. Headline sponsor is Mojers Druitt, and it'll be great to be back together once more. Other awards, preparation for the Bath Life Awards in 2022 has already begun. We'll be back to our usual spring timing, this time will be March 3rd, and please talk to us if you wish to be involved. And such has been the response to this year's, which is only a few weeks back. We've actually brought forward table sales as a limited number now available. Other awards are the Creative Bath Awards. We promote through Media Clash, we promote the creative, tech and cultural areas of Bath through a CIC, a community interest company, not-for-profit, that we run. It's called Creative Bath. And delighted to say that the Creative Bath Awards are returning this time, December 7th, at the newly revamped Doubletree by Hilton. If you'd like to connect with or support this vital sector, please let's talk. Of course, at the heart of all we do is Bath Life. And we are really, really proud to publish a magazine that celebrates all the good stuff in Bath. Thanks, as ever, for your support. Okay, let's do this. Let's introduce our speaker for today. Let's bring forward Jens. So Jens, I'll give you a little bit of background here. Jens' research has been digging deep into the understanding how consumers really think and behave, as well as examining potential for emerging in-store technologies. Jens has spent many years looking at what makes us buy, what we might or might not spend, why we might or might not spend longer in stores than we intended to. We've all done that. Maybe even the pressure of, because you spend time in the store, you almost feel the obligation to buy. I've been that, certainly in various stores in my life. And how far store design influences our purchases. There's some quite remarkable sort of personal methodologies involved there about how we navigate stores that Jens will be highlighting. There's also, of course, the challenge stroke opportunity as shopping has moved online, making us think more deeply about omni-channels, the integration of the various places, spaces, and perhaps even states of mind where consumers act with marketeers. And a few specific retail insights. For Jens, most interestingly, his family's had a grocery store in Stockholm for many years. So he's a direct practitioner as well as a sort of theoretician. So Jens, welcome to you. How are you this morning?
Thank you. I'm very well, thank you. I've, like I just said, I've been I'm in from the shower, the outdoor shower, to take a shower indoors instead after a morning run. So the day when I'm running is never a bad day. So it's a good day so far.
It's a good day so far. Well, that's one way of approaching it. A few hours into the day. Well, good for you. Glad to hear that. Very, very promising. Right, but I want to dive straight into a key issue facing retailers. This great pause of the pandemic has also been a great accelerator of change. How far, and I know it's too early in a sense, but how far do you think shopping habits have changed irrevocably from this time? Massively more online, less footfall in city centres, the growth of the 15-minute neighbourhood. What's the effect, do you think?
Well, to start answering that question, I think that if you go back 5-7 years or so, almost all retail companies, speaking to their strategic management, you would see that they were almost fearing the digitalization. They didn't know where to go. They had no clue on how to act, how to respond to that. Everything was going digital, and both when it comes to marketing communication and where people spend their time, everything was happening online. But I think since then, at least the bigger retailers have really started to take a grip of this. So what has happened, at least for the bigger retailers during the pandemic, during lockdown, has been that, as you said, it's been a fast forward to a future that they have been anticipating. So many large players, they have had, they've been prepared to do sort of a multi-channel kind of retailing where they sell either online or offline. And it hasn't been a dramatic change in that sense. It's been dramatic in the sense that they haven't really been prepared for the volumes. They haven't really been prepared to, provide the slots if we're talking about grocery retailing and so on, having deliveries. But to some extent, it's also been an easier life because they could deliver throughout all days. People were at home. People really bought everything online. So it was really, for those two reasons, it was actually becoming profitable for many retailers for the first time. They could deliver around the clock, or at least during awakened hours, and also really large transaction sizes. So I think depending on if you're a sort of big brand retailer or if you are a small retailer with one little store, the whole change has been very different. You mentioned I have a little store, and I do, and it's part of a larger chain, but we have opened a third. We have e-commerce and we have the traditional store, but we also opened a third channel to be even more fast in response to shoppers' needs. The online sales that we have is pretty much like what you see here in the UK. It's a dark store, so you have a warehouse somewhere where it's delivered from, and the merchandise selection or the range in the dark store is somewhat different from the physical store. So it's more than 3 times as big. So, but we also opened a direct channel, so people could either fax or phone us, and then we bought a little van so we could drive directly to them. So we felt the need for that kind of channel as well. And
were you approaching this as an experiment that prompted perhaps by the pandemic, the changing values approach and so on? You thought, well, we might as well try this, or was this born of a big strategic initiative with great planning?
It's somewhere in between, and I think having a grocery store is fantastic in the sense that it's, of course, a laboratory. I run a lot of experiments there, but it's also at the same time, I need to make it profitable. So I can't just come up with any kind of nonsense and then we would go bankrupt. So I need to make it work. But to sort of end this long answer by actually answering the question that you posed, I think what we saw with the pandemic was, what we see with the pandemic is an acceleration, yes. And some of it, some of the effects will remain. Some of them will entirely go away. but sort of as an average, I think shoppers will come back to the high street. Shoppers will come back to the malls. We shop for so many reasons. Around 20% of shoppers have as a primary goal to socialize. And that, if you take elderly, perhaps people who live in single households, which are a large share of all of us, they shop for so many other reasons than just acquiring the goods that they need to fill their cupboards. So I think a lot of what we used to see will come back, but will also, some industries will be gone, some stores will be gone, some outlets will have changed dramatically, and that will remain. So it's.
Could you talk about the areas which are most under threat, either of going or having to radically reinvent themselves?
Yeah, I think, you've seen over the years, in many economies, travel agencies, bookstores have more or less disappeared. Video stores, of course, because they've been replaced by streaming services. But in the UK, it's still the case that bookstores seem to, at least, they manage. Just here in Bath, we have a couple of bookstores, really good ones. So,
and bookstores have actually net have bounced back. They're, the much prophesied death of the physical book and thereby the bookstore, let alone the Amazon effect, actually played out as expected. For example, Bath has a number of great independent bookstores that have thrived.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, to me at least, that's sort of evidence that it's not just a macro perspective that's interesting. You can actually make a change depending on how you approach things. So if you, for instance, have a cafe in your bookstore and you make it more of you make it something more than just a place where you go to get a book. Because if you have nothing that you add to the service, then the deliverance of a book, then any shopper can buy it online. But if you add something extra, perhaps you have knowledgeable staff, you have nice displays that help you to find what you look for, you ensure that you have a good, service of if you're out of stock, that you can deliver, and you can also sit down and have the coffee, so you make more of a the trip is something more than just the acquisition. Then I think then you can actually do really good business even in a situation like this.
We'll perhaps come on to some of the more experiential aspects of shopping, a sort of more rounded experience, which and then also the display of expertise. I know you've got some key points on that. I want to come to one specific subset of that first question, really, which is about the growth of the 15-minute neighborhoods. The theory is that because so many more are either working from home permanently or temporarily, that in an hour's break or whatever, you don't want to walk more than 15 minutes to a place to go buy stuff. Do you see that as that sort of satellite opportunity as fundamentally strengthened by the pandemic, and thereby, because the totality of shopping probably hasn't increased, city centres perhaps go the other way?
I think if you look at it globally, the trend has been from sort of a 15-minute kind of situation to more of large shopping centers where people travel to. But the latest trend since 10 years or so has actually been to build residential properties within these shopping centers. I don't know how well established that idea is here in the UK. I haven't really seen it. I haven't been around in the UK long enough to see it. But in the US and in other parts of Europe, it's been quite a big trend, actually, that since there has been so many services or service outlets created or built in the large shopping centers, they've also started to build homes there. I think the whole shopping from home working from home situation, of course, will change things. But I also see that I'm at home now, and I see a lot of delivery trucks, and we have a little store newly built just nearby here. But I also feel that perhaps people actually need to get out of home. So I think, for instance, working in an office, it's rather the roads by which I commute that benefit from the footfall when in the old days. Today, potentially, at least here in Bath, the city center is quite attractive for a person like me, working from home, needing to get something done. Perhaps I need to go to the post office and I do some retail shopping at the same time. So I don't necessarily see that, I think city centers and high streets are, they are definitely interesting places. They are open areas. You can explore things. So I think it's very much like we talked about the bookstores. It's very much dependent on what you do with it, rather than that it's deemed to be doomed or something like that. You can definitely do something good with it. Definitely.
Yeah.
So.
There's a deep social utility over city centres. They are public space. We've seen, the growth in the parklet idea, that space can be used differently. The city centres aren't just the provinces of cars. I heard the expression, cities are too much the dormitories for cars, because cars are just not used so often. We'll come on to the car effect in a moment. But I'm gleaning from you and I know this is very broad brush, that broadly speaking, whilst there's been an acceleration of pre-existing trends, maybe something of a cutback, and we won't quite revert to those pre-lapse era in 2019 days, but it may not be quite as overtly or as proportionally as much online as it is currently.
Well, there are no figures that we can use from the statistical databases that we use. I mean, the latest figures are from 2020 or so. But talking, if I just use the examples of sort of my store and the say 50 stores that I work the closest with, I'd say that numbers are almost back to the way they were before lockdown. Really? When what happened was that footfall decreased a lot, but the average transaction went up a lot. So it's all the turnover. We lost perhaps 5% or so, but we increased instead online. So especially grocery retailing, basically everywhere has gone up during the lockdown. And now we're almost back to where we were before. So people have started to come more often, but make smaller purchases on each visit. And I see this also if you look around, it's not the panic kind of buying that you see anymore. It's more that people use the baskets instead of the shopping carts and so on. So you see it sort of reverting to, I think, something similar, at least to what it was before.
Interesting. Talk to us a bit about the how important retail is as part of the social glue of cities, the sort of civic fabric of society. That has been, give or take, been missing in for a while in recent times for obvious reasons. Certainly, most notably during specific lockdowns. But what role does retail play within that civic fabric?
I think it's. To me as a retailer, I think it's very important. And, as a professor studying retailing. No, but I think it has so many different aspects to it. We talked about the social aspects. For many young people, good or bad, but they see shopping as their main hobby. And you express yourself with brands. Commercialism is such a big part of society today, so it's hard to separate shopping almost from everyday life. If I take my 3 kids, they they're always on their phones, and what they do there, they advertise are intertwined with short video clips that they watch for other reasons, music they listen to. So everything's sort of in there, and retailers have really tried to they try to, and they succeed in participating in this seamless experience. So when you watch a YouTube clip and, you know, H&M is sponsoring, or some big brand is sponsoring, Coca-Cola is sponsoring, everything's sort of intertwined. So from that perspective, retailing and marketing is really, all these companies, they have us in a firm grip, if you say. And I think from more of a sort of people perspective, if you just think about Bath, places you like to spend time, I'd say that many people would say, yeah, I'd like to go downtown or down to the city. And there you can, you know, explore things. You can go to have a coffee or tea. You can go to watch things. But shopping is it's very important there too, or stores are very important. I think we all feel the sadness when we see shops that have closed down and it's just an empty window. At least I really feel that it's almost, you know, it makes me sad. So I think the kind of inspiration that you get, and the social things, and you can do so many good things also with retail. And I think that's something that retailers don't tell enough stories about, but retailers often participate in local events. It could be, you know, community-based things where they are big employers, but they also perhaps sell locally produced merchandise. So they are really, you know, depending on who they are, but they can sell things that really are tied into the local community. So I think there are so many different layers where retail play a really important role. And I think one thing that we perhaps don't think about at all, almost, because it's so hard to grasp, but yet very important, is that we need, I mean, we basically use things all the time. It can be that we sleep in a bed, or we wear clothes, or we eat food. And we need the stores to inspire us, to help us to sort of grow in this
we need promise and stimulus, I guess, whether it's new products or new ways of looking at the world, which retail can help us with. That's
yeah, and it can be, you know, your home. You want to feel that your home is more welcoming, or that you like it better, and you need, if you were to come up entirely yourself with what you need to improve your home, it's very hard. So you don't really see it like that, perhaps. But when you go to retail settings and you look at, I don't know, could be chandeliers, could be bookshelves, could be armchairs, you just, you know, you need to get out there. And I think retail space, even though it's commercial and perhaps everybody don't like it for that reason, it feels that you have to pay to sort of or spend money to earn a reason for being there. But still, I think retail is meaningful for us in many ways that we don't perhaps spontaneously think about.
We're almost getting into the existential nature of retail, what it does to prompt the human condition.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to come back to a point I mentioned earlier about some of your research pieces, the paradox and oddities, and just tease out what it's, you know, why some of these are the case, and what it might mean for retailers. So one of them, let's start with this one. Apparently the case, a price increase of 10% proves to be an effective method of attracting price-sensitive customers to the store. That feels like a contradiction. How so, and what does it mean?
The underlying reason for this is basically what we're talking about, actually, that it's very hard to to know what you know or to remember what you know. It's very hard to become aware of what you would actually like. So for instance, if you see a room that you like, you can sense that, okay, this is something I like, but it would be very hard for you to just, come up with the ideas from a blank paper, so to say. The problems that we have with processing information is basically the reason for retailing being successful. And one of those shortcomings that we have is that our price knowledge is very scarce. So the typical shopper, they don't even know the prices of the products that they buy frequently.
Just to push back on that point, is that also true for those who are, less affluent, the more constrained budgets, for whom every single, if not penny, but certainly pound, actually matters? Do they also typically are less exactly aware of prices?
Unfortunately, on average, they suffer even more from this. Oh. But of course, you have. It's often said that around a third of all shoppers are economic shoppers, meaning that they are more price conscious. But of those price conscious, around half of them are people who look for discounts, meaning that they often buy larger volumes than they actually are able to consume. So at the end, they lose money on it anyhow. So there are many sort of traps. But coming back to this, why it's a good, efficient way to work with increased prices, actually, to attract economical shoppers. The thing is that there's a strategy called everyday low prices that some stores use. So they basically reduce the prices to, the lowest price they can afford. But they don't have anything to communicate, so they can't work with discounts, they can't work with coupons and so on. And since price memory is so bad or low or scarce, it's more efficient to increase the prices and then work with deep discounts that you can scream about in flyers, in ads or online, because that attracts more price sensitive shoppers. So there's been experiments run on this in real life, in real stores. So they have 100 stores and 50 of them increase the prices and work more with high-low. The other 50 reduce their prices. And it's obvious that it's a better strategy also to attract economic shoppers, to increase the prices and then work with deep discounts.
So the slightly more cynical view of that is that that we are all being played by one way or another. We are all essentially the products of experiments, and those experiments are being absolutely refined at the margin, but they're essentially their role is to encourage us to spend more than we might have done otherwise with a particular store. Do you have any sort of if I make a very, very broad comparison, it's probably the nature of my comments today, perhaps with social media, where the same types of arguments are made about algorithms, with playback content, which in some cases is pernicious or is fake news or whatever, but it's an algorithmic approach, it's a semi-scientific approach to content. Do you have any concerns that retail playing the system in such of the ways you described is actually, detrimental in some longer form way?
Yeah, of course. I mean, the reason why I started, why I became a researcher actually, was that I was very interested in philosophy and the free will and sort of social psychology. And I was, taken aback by the fact that people were so easily influenced. So I wanted to study the reasons for this. Is it really true that you can fool people so easily? And why is that so? How can we be so stupid? So we, buy 300% more of a product just because it's put on a display instead of in the shelf. Don't we know what we want at all? So obviously that that tool or that mechanism was sort of the source of my interest in the beginning. And then I guess, unlike algorithms, when it comes to retailing, there is a human behind it, behind the decisions. So I guess as a shopper, you have to trust the retailer, the human behind it. He or she can use various techniques to fool you, I guess you can call it, but you trust that that's not the case, not more than necessarily so. But yeah, I definitely see the reason for your question and the reason for concern. And I think, if retailers were cynical and you could see that, they just opened the store and they didn't think at all about returning customers. They didn't think at all that they would need to play a fair game because they would be gone in a year. Then it could definitely be more so. I think, or I know, all the people in the business that I know of, they want to have a, returning customer. They want to build a profitable business, but they also want to be around in 15 years time. So I think, I don't think that they would, for their own sake, they don't want to play that game, even if they could do it more dramatically than they do. And I also want to add one thing to this, and that is, in our research, it's shown that around 80% of shoppers that at least enter a grocery store, perhaps even more so in a fashion store or a home store, they do so to find inspiration. They know that they want to buy something for dinner, for instance, but they haven't really made up their mind and they're a bit bored with the ideas that they spontaneously come to think about. So they go in there and they look at the shelves and look for some kind of inspiration. And I think that is an everyday problem, at least to families with kids. Parents feel a stress about, serving their kids food that's good value, tasty and nutritious enough so the kids will eat it and feel well. So that's a stress, and that's the battle that the grocery stores also have to fight. They have to be able to create displays and create campaigns that help these families, give them inspiration. So that's sort of the positive thing of it, side of it.
And slight words in your mouth, but to take that point, that precept applies to any form of retailing. What is the psychological state of buyers or customers or simply just humans when they come into stores, and how can you inspire them, whatever your offering is? And the prompted inspiring, you probably have the research insofar as it can be broken out, but that must be a very material part of unexpected purchases. Sort of totality of purchases are prompted by the in-store displays or some such.
Yeah, and when I talked about the sort of subtle things that retailing or retail stores actually do that you don't really think about because it's so, well, it's hard to point to, but it makes a huge difference. Say a mannequin. Say you're a fashion store, say you put clothes on a mannequin, or say that you simply put them on the same rack. So you have, I don't know, a skirt and a top. If you put them next to each other, people don't make sense of it. They see a skirt and a top and they don't see that that's an outfit. But if you put them above each other, just the way it would look on a human being, then people more spontaneously understand that this is an outfit. Simply, or same way, if you put them on a mannequin, 4 times more people think about it as that's something that I could wear. But if it's on a hanger, you don't spontaneously see it, that's something I could wear. If you take, sorry.
Well, I was going to say that's about the nature of gaining attention. There's a view that almost attention is the currency of the future. That we, in our world of media, if you haven't got attention, you're not even at the game, essentially. But
I also add dimension to it, and that's perception or interpretation. And that's really what all this is about. That or attention is the first step, but after that comes perception or interpretation. And 25% of all the energy that you consume during a day is processing, mental processing. So it's very laborious to think and evaluate and reflect. Therefore, almost all the time, your brain tries to minimize the effort that it wants to minimize processing. Therefore, you see the top as a top and nothing else. But if you put it just next to each other, next to the skirt or the trousers, you can you can help the shopper with minimal effort to understand what it would look like on you. And it's the same with groceries, basically. If you put, products that everybody knows, if they reflect on it, that they work well together, take the hamburger and the cheese. You know that they work well together, but if you don't see them just adjacent to each other, you don't put up the energy to think through it. So you need to work with displays to really enhance processing, to make it as effortless as possible to understand the solution there. Because people go into a grocery store, they look at 10,000 different items, but they don't see any meals.
It's a form of option paralysis, I guess. There's almost too much choice. And I want to come on to one of your other observations, research-based observations. This isn't just predications. A good way to make customers feel that a store has increased its range is to reduce it. Less really is more.
Yeah, and that's that's something that I find all the time. It's very common. Anyone in the business, actually, they know that whenever they have cleaned up their assortment, when they have worked with assortment reduction, the most common comment from shoppers is, "Oh, it's so fantastic. You've added so much to the assortment, and then you've taken away 15-20% of what you've actually used to have." And that all boils down to that when an environment is too cluttered, you stop seeing anything, basically. So having the same shelf space as you usually do, taking out what doesn't sell and giving more facings, more display space to what's actually selling is a very good way of increasing the perception of a wide or deep range. And it's been tested psychologically in experiments, and it's been tested in reality in field studies. So it's a known fact in the industry. But when it comes to retail, it's a bit strange because there are so many untold stories that people in the industry, they know them and they behave according, they do these things, but people in marketing, in advertising, in branding, they aren't aware of these things. So they come up with decisions, about how the retail store should be run, and it's often contradicting to what the retailer knows is true. So that's sort of a problem for the industry, I think.
And intuitively, I think many watching will be thinking, well, that is just so true elsewhere. For example, if you have too much data, you can miss the piece of information which really matters. Or I hesitate to look around this room in some of the more crowded areas. You can't see the wood for the trees. It's almost that argument. There's one area that you've raised, which...
Greg, can I add a thing?
Go on, yeah.
I think I'm looking at your bookshelf behind you. I think you should organize it in color. If you do it in waterfalls, in vertical stripes like that, color-wise, it'll become art. It'll be beautiful. I promise you.
Well, wasn't there in the early days of lockdown, there was a critique? Please don't look at my bookshelf too closely. But there was a critique of bookshelves which were arranged in that exact order, that they were there to be aesthetically pleasing rather than to be, a means of navigating. But I wasn't talking about my bookshelf. I was going to make a point about books. That's probably one of the few retail areas, I'm sure there are others, where the less is more thing maybe doesn't work, that what one wants as a bibliophile is the sense of plenitude. There are just, the shelves are groaning with lots of interesting books. Yeah. You have your tables, your displays, the best sold, the list and so on, but you need the plenitude. So maybe that is an outlier, but broadly the less is more is applicable in all areas.
I think what you're tapping into is that selling in stores is a two-step process, and the less is more concept is good in the first step, in the attention capturing step. So, for instance, the waterfall display of a bookshelf is very good to get someone who's just visiting, who's just walking by, to stop and look. Yeah. Then, actually, in the second step, you would like to have it the other way around. Then you want it to be a bit messy, because then you start searching and really analyzing. So for instance, there was an experiment made by Campbell Soup that they put they either displayed all the soups in alphabetical order or just randomly, and if they display them randomly, they sell more, because then you cannot automatically understand that tomato soup comes at the end. Then you have to look at all the different soup cans to find the tomato soup, and then you find mushroom soup, and you find, whatever soup that you also like. So it's a two-step process, where the first step is enhanced by creating order, especially with the help of colors, but the second step is helped by disorganizing. And if you think about it online, actually you have to do it the opposite way online as you do it offline. Online, you probably find your category by clicking at some categories or so, where you filter what's being displayed. So this means that once you have sort of gotten to the category where you're going to make the subcategory where you're going to make your selection, it should be displayed disorganized, because then you look at the different flavors or authors or whatever it is. Whereas in the physical store, you have to ensure that people stop by the subcategory. You have to create some kind of organized display, otherwise you just walk by. And I should say also, of course, if you look for a specific item and that's not there, then of course you're in trouble as a retailer. And I guess that if you're reading a specific series and you've just read the first 14 first books and then you want the 15th, you're not happily buying the 16th and just jumping number 15. So of course that's.
But just on that, one of the early points there, isn't that one of the challenges, and of course there are many, of online retailing? You don't have that apparent serendipity that you can achieve in store, where you have this prompted. It's very difficult, because on the whole, online purchasing tends to be purposive. I have a reasonably clear idea of what I wish, and I narrow my choices down. As opposed to retail, it almost works the other way around. I expect to find something, and your point about being inspired. Difficult to be inspired online, isn't it? Or more difficult?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And I'll give you one anecdote and one research example of that. The anecdote is I spoke to the CEO of H&M, and he said that, if you go into a store, it takes you just a couple of minutes to get an overview of, or an idea about what's trendy, what colors would be in trend this season, and so on. Very quick. Same if you browse a catalog. It takes you a couple of minutes to understand what's sort of trendy. But if you go online and want to know what's trendy, you have to spend 24 hours, right? Because you have to look at everything. So yes, it's very inefficient to browse online. And research also shows that due to problems with fit and sizes and stuff like that, people tend to be much more loyal to a certain brand when they buy online. So you end up going to the same retailer. If it's again fashion, you buy 3 different colors of the same shirt instead of buying 3 different shirts.
If it works, stick with it.
Yeah.
And there's a subset of this, which we perhaps is more related to the sustainability discussion we're going to be having in November. but is of so much of online retailing, of course, is you don't really know. You buy 3 or 5 or 7, and you return, most of those. Only one that works. Whereas in a store, you try on, and of course you don't buy all you try on. Different. I just want to bring in a couple of observations from Angus McLaughlin, who gratifyingly, Jens, he says, interesting stuff, guys. So there you go. This point about the premise that online shopping won't continue at previous volumes. He says, he's very firm, says it's totally wrong. By 2028, it's predicted that over 50% of all UK shopping will be online. It's currently at 23%. So there's a significant acceleration, at least according to that piece of research. Unless high street retailers can effectively join the online bonanza, we won't have independent retailing on our high streets anymore. I'll stop that. There's a number of different things here. He says the key issue is making e-commerce marketplace more equitable for traditional high street merchants. Otherwise, they can't survive as retailers. Do you buy this thesis? It's quite it's if not diametric, it's in a different place to yours. Your initial point.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking. To me, it's not so much online versus offline. To me, it's omnichannel. And I mean, take IKEA. Since I'm Swedish, I'm using the Swedish brands as examples. They've used their catalogs a lot to sell. Now the catalogs are not as helpful anymore, but you go online to get your inspiration from IKEA. And IKEA actually open up quite a few of stores department stores in city centers, because they see the city center stores as kind of a replacement of the catalog as well. You go in there and you browse and so on. So, I'm not so focused on the channel per se. I'm just saying that Amazon has made its biggest investment ever, and Amazon isn't, they were born online. Their biggest investment ever has been to buy a physical store chain, Whole Foods Market. I have a lot of companies that I collaborate with that are born online. They have had their first, 5-10 years online only, and their ambition, all of them, is to open physical stores, because they need the physical stores as adverts to attract shoppers to their online sales.
Showrooms, perhaps, yeah.
It's an interplay. So I'm saying that, to H&M, it doesn't really matter if it's another example. H&M has their biggest market share online in the areas where they have the highest density of physical stores. So the different channels collaborate. They attract shoppers to the brand, and to the big companies, to the retailers, it's not important if you start on social media or in the physical store or in the e-commerce store, as long as you shop. And they develop apps that you can, H&M, they have an in-store app, so you can scan the barcode and see where it's been manufactured and the environmental footprint and so on. So everything's just a mix of online, offline, mobile, and so on. So I wouldn't worry so much about if sales is 50% or 80% or 20% online, offline, because where you get the impressions, where you get the inspiration, the retailers, they don't care about that. They just want it to be a shopper journey where you get inspiration and where you eventually buy some stuff. The independent retailers, that's a different story. And I think they have to come up with smart ways to find their role in this digital universe. And in shopping centers, it's always been the case that you have these big anchor stores that attract many shoppers, and then you have the smaller stores who position themselves where you have a lot of footfall. So I guess that can still be a viable strategy for the independents, whether it's close to the big anchor stores online or offline.
I suppose, one of your underlying points there, we all believe we have agency over our decisions. And if that were the case, advertising wouldn't exist, let alone prompted purchases and so on. But that the question is not so much exactly where people transact from. The very front end may well be using a phone, online, whatever, but it's the journey that gets you there, which is all different forms of stimulation, from social media to advertising such as Bath Live to the retail store environment its own right. I want to come back to a couple other points you made in your research. You've touched on this one, but a store can charge more for one and the same product if it is displayed against a blue rather than a red background. What are examples of that? And surely if too many do that, or at least individual stores do it too often, isn't the effect negated?
No, I think you that's sort of a basic fact that you have to just
just accept.
Exactly. So the basic thing here is that 83% of all the sensory input that your brain is processing comes from your eyes. So the eyes is the main source of input, sensory input. And the fastest and most important quality of all visual input is color. And hue, going from cold to warm colors, have a different effect on you depending on the wavelength and so on. So the warmer the color, the redder it is, the faster you detect it. This means that if you have a store environment that is red, the background takes over all your attention and your processing, meaning that there is less processing and less attention left for studying the products. And this was studied in a TV store, actually, where walls were either blue or red, this example that I'm thinking of, and turned out that people bought less TVs and less expensive TVs when the walls were red, but they spent longer time trying to make up their mind about what to buy. But they obviously were more confused because constantly the background wall was interfering with the processing. So red is a very good color if you want it on something that should be visible, like a logo or a package, but it's not a good background color because it does exactly the opposite. It doesn't stay in the background. It jumps into the foreground.
I can almost hear the retailers of Bath looking around thinking, oh my God, that explains it. We need more blue or whatever. Perhaps Bath will be painted blue as a consequence of this webinar.
A very good, another paper, another piece of research we did was more about brightness contrast. So from dark to light. And in the eye, you have the cones and the rods, and the rods detect brightness contrast, the cones detect hue, and the cones are slower than the rods. The rods are faster. So if you really want to create a sharp contrast and really want to do the most out of this color thing, make sure that you work also with brightness contrast. So instead of just adding, having calm backgrounds and then adding screaming warm colors like yellow, orange, red to products and signage, work more with a light, dark perspective, because that's even more efficient.
Well, there's a lot to process here. I want to bring in a question which you've touched on. This is from Lydia Tewksbury on Bath Live. Hello, Lydia. Do you think this multi-channel retail world makes it harder for smaller businesses to compete? Or a slight paradox, are smaller able to be more nimble and perhaps able to respond more quickly to societal or individual changes?
I think the ones who will lose or who are losers are the ones who are not seeing the opportunity independent of size. the grocery store that I talked about, my little store, it's small. It's 450 square meters. So it's not really small for Bath. Everything's small in Bath, but you know, it's small for Swedish grocery store, from a Swedish grocery store perspective. So it's sort of a convenience store. So obviously we should not be a winner on social media, but the store manager, he seemed to be willing to learn everything there was to learn about Facebook. So we now have 5,000 followers on Facebook. We have so extremely efficient campaigns on Facebook. We post coupons on Facebook that you can scan in the checkout. We have auctions. So say, for instance, we get a hold of some, you know, something boar or something that you usually can't sell in the store. Then we have an auction, everything on Facebook. We work with Instagram a lot, also with more inspirational images, but we really have an extremely active Facebook community. We have shoppers voting for what to add to the assortment. We have, lots of competitions. So I think, and Facebook wasn't supposed to be, it's supposed to be an interrupt media. It's not supposed to work for retail stores. But if you have a local store with a local audience, it really makes sense to be active on media like that.
Essentially, one thing you're saying there is repertoire. It's playing all the channels. It's using, for example, the physical display, as it were, of a magazine. We regularly showcase interesting new products in Bath, and that sense of physicality you can actually see at your leisure what there is out there. But equally, you play, the various channels, as you say. We've had a question from our very good friend, anonymous attendee, who always attends these things. Your point about it taking 24 hours to shop online, making decisions, isn't that where influencers come in? Once you find the influencer you like or admire, they give you pointers on what to buy. That's essentially another channel. It's one wouldn't predicate business on that channel, but influencers have their importance, increasing importance. Perhaps.
Yes, but and this may sound contradictory, but there are some very extremely good examples of very profitable, very successful influencers, obviously, yes. But if you look at referral statistics, that is the traffic sources leading to e-commerce, social media stand for less than 1%. So
1%.
Less than 1%, yeah. So the typical, the big money in e-commerce is that you go to the same outlets or the same e-stores that you usually do, and more habitually buy and buy and buy. So obviously that's not the case for some products, especially for really young audiences. But I guess social media is, we spend so much time on. I have many students who have 16 hours of screen time.
Yeah.
So we spend a lot of time on social media, and therefore it's so obvious to us, and we see the examples all the time. But I think we exaggerate the generalizability of influencers.
And I think, as perhaps a general point, not to underestimate the intelligence of consumers. We all have some element of bullshit detector out there. That influencers at some point in some way are being paid. Just as George Clooney is being paid, and he's an influencer selling Nespresso, whatever, or Beckham or whomever.
Yeah, and I think if you've tried, I guess, a couple of times, 2-3 times, you bought something like that and it didn't fit or it didn't do what you hoped to do. But then, when it comes to where you buy your everyday fashion or your everyday food or so, that's places that you keep coming back to. So I think.
I guess it's the dichotomy between, if it works, stick with it, and prompting to try to be inspired, as you've said earlier. Jens, we're coming towards the end of the hour. I've got a couple of last questions, probably 3 for you, really. One of your other observations, and perhaps if you could respond briefly to this one, shades of theme park navigation. A store sells more if the customer turn is counterclockwise. Why?
Yeah, That's crazy. It used to be I don't really know why. I just know that it's so. And I have, the number of cases that have been used to study this is more than 2 million shoppers. And it's from different continents. So it's not left-right traffic or anything. But I think to a large extent is that the majority of people are right-handed. And if you walk with your hand towards the products, you touch more products. And as soon as you touch, talking about processing, you want the product more. So the more you touch, the more you will eventually end up buying. So I think that's the major reason, but there are also other things at play that I can't really explain. I just looked at results from, we have around 500 shoppers that we just randomly select and put eye trackers on, so we see how they move about. And it's 50% more efficient to have a display on the right of the shopper than to the left. And I don't know, it doesn't make sense.
I'll give you a couple of other examples. One is in advertising, a right-hand page in a magazine such as Bath Life has greater prominence than the left-hand page because somehow we know. Yeah. And the other is medieval castles, that the staircases were typically anti-clockwise for that. Hang on, which way around? Clockwise for that right-handed reason. If you're trying to keep an aggressor out, you want your right-handed sword to be.
Okay. Yeah.
Different. A couple other points for you. When you go shopping in real life, and it must be quite difficult to switch off from your professional perspective, do you find yourself sort of more often impressed or puzzled or dismayed by product positionings on shelves?
I think I would like to be impressed more often than I am. I would like to get inspiration more often than I do. I think most stores are terrific when it comes to creating a store atmosphere that makes it easy for the people working there to replenish and fill up the shelves and front them and put up the signage and run everything efficiently. But I think the stores I fall in love with are the stores where the retailers also think a bit about what meets the eye and what's selling and what really is inspiring me. And I don't think I meet that too often.
And perhaps a couple of smart or maybe less smart practices that you've seen, you thought, okay, that makes a lot of sense. I hadn't thought of that, or I'm struck by the way that. What's occurred recently for you?
What's that?
What's occurred recently that you've seen recently? You thought that's a clever piece of thinking in store that's prompted you to change or you to think.
Let's see now. Well, I have to come up with something that sort of meets the expectations now too, don't I? Let's just say it like this. I like cross-merchandising displays, like we were into. I think as soon as I'm challenged, I've often been thinking in grocery retailing, what is the equivalent of a mannequin in grocery retailing? How can you create that kind of, because I know that a mannequin is really good. It's if you take away the mannequins from a fashion store, you lose 25% of the sales because people they don't navigate, they don't feel inspiration, they feel that the quality is much lower. So I'm trying to figure out what can be the equivalent in the grocery store of the mannequin from the fashion store. And the closest I can get is when you have, some kind of cross-merchandising display. So you basically take ingredients from a dish and put together in a nice way. And I've spent a couple of weeks training bachelor students in retailing in Riga, and there they do quite a lot of that. You see a lot of love in the stores in the sense that it's the visual merchandising is really taken care of, both in grocery stores, but in any kind of store. So yeah, I'd say cross-merchandising.
Cross-merchandising, well, who knows, perhaps we'll see video walls of succulent food being prepared in front of you that prompts you to, to try stuff, who knows. Last one is a slightly more personal one. As mentioned, you're a retail practitioner as well as a theoretician. Your family's had this grocery store in Stockholm for many years. Has that been your petri dish? Or is the, as so often with many of us, like a plumber with a leaky tap at home, have you not always put into practice your theories in your own retail store?
I think I'm co-owner, and I have another guy who's sort of running the store. So for me, it's just been such a pleasure to have that store, and I've learned so much about cooking, ingredients, and so on. And I think if I listen to Jocke, the other guy, he thinks that I'm practicing a little bit too much of what I study in the store.
Right.
He's more of the efficient kind of guy who wants everything to be, well, you can't display it like that because it's not going to be, we have to sell the stuff. We can't keep filling it up if you display it like that. But so I'm perhaps overdoing it a bit. Actually, I'm perhaps too much of a researcher when I'm working in the store.
Well, we're going to call a halt to it now. It's we're a little bit through the hour. Thank you ever so much for this Bath Life Business Surgery speaker today, Jens Nordfalt and the University of Bath. Thank you indeed. Thank you for your insight and inspiration, provocations in some cases, and I would hope that retailers watching this will benefit from the insights that you've given today. And thank you.
And feel free to contact me. Feel free to contact me if you want to.
Okay, well, if anyone wishes to, we'll put some comms out about this subsequently, and we'll hook anyone up with Jens if that's appropriate. That's a very good offer. Thank you. Thank you very much. But thank you also to those watching live or on YouTube, and for your questions live. I'll particularly cite Angus McLaughlin. I wasn't able to come back to your subsequent observation, Angus, but your prior one was stimulating, certainly. Thank you, all of you, for your support for Bath Life, and good luck in the coming months, particularly to the retailers with the expected huge and year-defining Christmas surge just about to begin. This has been a Media Clash production, and this has been our latest Bath Life Business Surgery. Thank you. Bath together, always. Thank you.